Have you ever just looked around and, felt it? That deep feeling that things just have to change.
Mm,
Maybe something small, maybe something huge. Now imagine that feeling across a whole nation.
yeah,
And then seeing a relatively small bunch of people actually spark these massive shifts.
it's powerful stuff.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're plunging into the past again today, trying to connect the dots to right now.
Trying to find those aha moments.
Exactly. Today, we're looking at a really fascinating slice of American history, America's Age of Reform, roughly 1800 to 1848.
It was anything but quiet.
Right. A real cauldron of social, moral, religious energy. People genuinely believe they could improve themselves, improve society.
A powerful conviction.
So our mission today is to unpack how and why these different reform movements popped up and grew, and maybe what they tell us about that, I guess,
Okay.
that American spirit of change.
Yeah, and it's key to remember this wasn't just top-down government stuff. This was a time when core American ideas about democracy, about the individual, they sort of crashed into massive social changes.
Creating fertile ground.
Exactly. Fertile ground for this widespread, almost grassroots desire to reshape things, mostly through voluntary efforts. People felt empowered, like they should act.
And grassroots is the word. We're going to meet some surprising people today, radical abolitionists, folks trying to build utopias,
Utopian dreamers. Yeah.
and the very first pioneers
Yeah.
fighting for women's rights. So, okay, let's dig in.
Let's do it.
This period saw so much change so fast. What were the big forces behind it all? It feels like a perfect storm kind of thing.
You've really hit on it. It wasn't one single thing, but if I had to point to the foundation, it's that explosion of democratic and individualistic belief.
After the revolution.
Yeah, exactly. A much stronger belief that individuals could change things, improve themselves, improve society. That was a bit different from the earlier, more, rationalist thinking.
More logic-based.
Right. This was a counter movement almost, embracing religious feeling, emotional experience as just as valid, maybe even more powerful.
Interesting.
And then layer on top of that the huge impact of the market revolution. The economy was shifting dramatically.
Away from farms towards industry and commerce.
Right. And that created opportunities, sure, but also a lot of social disruption, people moving, new kinds of work.
Unease.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But it also fostered this intense focus on individual responsibility, upward mobility, this kind of gospel of improvement, you could call it.
Work hard, live right, get ahead.
That's the idea, which, fueled progress, but also maybe sometimes made people blame individuals for poverty rather than looking at the bigger picture, the system.
Yeah, that tension's still around.
It is, and this belief in improving yourself morally, it didn't just stay in the economic sphere, it connected right into the religious revivals happening.
Okay, then that brings us to the Second Great Awakening. This sounds like it was more than just church revivals.
Oh, absolutely. It was this huge Protestant revival that just swept the nation. Massive outdoor camp meetings, really emotional conversions.
Wow.
It started fundamentally as preachers trying to get people to give up vices, especially alcohol. The idea was that individual moral choices were the key to fixing society's problems.
Do it yourself.
Pretty much. But its influence just exploded outwards. It fueled all sorts of moral and social reforms, inspired new religions, these fascinating utopian experiments, all driven by this intense spiritual energy, this feeling that society could be perfected.
So let me see if I've got this. You've got democratic ideals giving people a voice,
Right.
economic change, creating opportunity and anxiety, and this massive spiritual revival pushing for moral action. It really does sound like a pressure cooker.
That's a great way to put it. A unique environment where the drive to change yourself and change society just became this incredibly powerful force. People really believed in progress.
And so much of that energy flowed right into these reform movements. The Second Great Awakening sounds like it was a launch pad for both established religious change and these wilder experiments.
It's amazing, isn't it, how that spiritual intensity led in so many directions. Take Mormonism, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Founded by Joseph Smith.
Right, in the 1840s. Claimed divine revelations, translated the Book of Mormon, but they faced intense persecution, partly because of polygamy.
Which led to tragedy.
Yes, Smith was lynched. Brigham Young then led the community west to Utah, looking for a place they could just practice their faith freely. It's an incredible story of, belief and resilience.
And beyond new religions, you had people trying to literally build perfect societies, utopian communities. What was the idea there?
They were these deliberate attempts to create, ideal ways of living based on shared values, often totally separate from mainstream life.
But living out those ideals must have been tough.
Oh, incredibly. The practical side often tripped them up. Look at the Shakers.
Known for their furniture, but also
Celibacy, gender equality, communal living, that very distinct worship style with dancing. Great ideals, but a community that relies only on new converts, no births. That's a challenge long term.
right.
Or Brook Farm, inspired by transcendentalists, they wanted to balance intellectual life and manual labor, both essential, they thought.
Sounds good in theory.
Yeah, but getting scholars excited about hard farm work day after day, that created friction. And then you had Fruitlands, led by Bronson Alcott.
Louisa May Alcott's father.
The very same, super radical, extreme self-sufficiency, strict vegetarians, no animal labor. They pulled the plows themselves.
Wow. Talk about commitment.
It really shows that tension, doesn't it, between
Sure.
these high-minded ideals and just, well, basic human needs and practicality. Most failed, but the idea behind them, that yearning for something different, that stuck around.
It's just mind-boggling, the sheer audacity of it.
Mhm.
Trying to build perfection from the ground up, rethinking everything. Family, work, food,
Yeah.
like a historical reality show almost.
Mhm.
A very intense one. Okay, so while some were off building these experimental bubbles, what about the reformers looking squarely at the society they had and seeing things that just had to go? Let's start with temperance against alcohol.
Right, and you have to understand, alcohol was everywhere back then. The average intake for drinkers was maybe 5 gallons of hard liquor a year per person.
5 gallons, that's a lot.
Roughly 3 times today's level. It was just
Okay.
normal. So the Second Great Awakening really gave the temperance movement its fire. Preachers urged people, publicly pledged, to give it up. It was seen as key to moral improvement for individuals and the nation.
So it wasn't just about health, it was moral.
Very much so. This led to the American Temperance Society in 1826 clergy, businessmen. It grew incredibly fast, thousands of chapters, mostly targeting working class men.
Why them specifically?
Well, the argument was that temperance meant better workers, less crime, less poverty. So factory owners backed it, politicians started cracking down on public drinking.
Makes sense from their perspective.
But it wasn't universally popular. Recent immigrants, particularly Irish and German folks, often rejected it. Alcohol was part of their culture, their community life.
Right, not just a vice to them.
Exactly. And women played a huge role, too. The Daughters of Temperance emerged, arguing abstinence protected families from, the damage of drunkenness. It was a way for women to exert moral influence.
So from tackling personal habits like drinking, reformers then turned to what many saw as the nation's biggest moral crisis: slavery. This wasn't just politics for them, was it?
No, for many, it was fundamentally a sinful institution. That moral conviction made compromise incredibly hard to even imagine.
So who were the key players here? How did they approach it?
You had a real range. William Lloyd Garrison was probably the most radical voice, published The Liberator, co-founded the American Anti-Slavery Society.
What made him so radical?
He believed in moral persuasion, not violence, but he was absolutely uncompromising. Famously burned a copy of the Constitution in public.
Burned the Constitution. What?
He saw it as a pro-slavery document, fundamentally flawed because it protected the institution. A shocking act.
Definitely makes a statement. Who else stood out? Maybe someone with a different perspective.
Well, then you have Frederick Douglass, an escaped slave. His very existence just demolished pro-slavery arguments.
An incredible figure.
Taught himself to read and write, became this amazing orator. Garrison influenced him early on, but Douglass eventually forged his own path. His autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, it's devastating.
Now so.
It just lays bare the dehumanizing effect of slavery, not just on the enslaved, but on the enslavers too. How it corrupted everyone it touched. His personal story was undeniable.
A powerful testimony.
Hugely powerful. And you also had things like the Amistad case, where abolitionists defended enslaved Africans who had revolted on a ship, often using Christian arguments against slavery.
So linking it back to religious morality.
Yes. And key figures like Grace Bustle Douglas, an African-American activist for abolition and women's rights, and the Grimke sisters, Sarah and Angelina.
They were from the South, right?
Exactly. Southern women who turned against slavery and became outspoken abolitionists and women's rights advocates. Incredible courage. Plus David Walker, whose appeal called for immediate abolition, even resistance.
So even as the North moved towards emancipation, the fight was far from over, especially regarding rights for free Black citizens.
Absolutely. Emancipation happened gradually in the North. The free black population grew, but many states still put up legal barriers restricting their rights. It was a complex picture.
The moral conviction here, the sheer bravery, taking on drinking culture, taking on the institution of slavery, it's really something. These people truly believed they could make a difference.
They absolutely did.
And that energy, especially from the anti-slavery fight, seems to have directly fueled another major movement, women's rights. How did that connection work?
It was a very direct link. Many women who got deeply involved in abolition, particularly in groups like the American Anti-Slavery Society, started realizing, wait a minute.
What did they realize?
They realized their own status as women limited their ability to even fight for abolition effectively. They were often silenced, sidelined. It really clashed with that whole cult of domesticity idea.
Right, the idea that a woman's place was strictly in the home, handling domestic things, and that moral reform was basically man's work.
Exactly. And their experience fighting against slavery showed them that was wrong and limiting. This frustration boiled over really into a foundational moment. The Seneca Falls Convention in 1848.
The big one.
Yeah, the landmark event. Led by figures like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, they called this meeting specifically to talk about women's rights. It was a bold assertion that women deserved full equality.
And they issued that famous declaration.
The Declaration of Sentiments and Resolutions. And what's so powerful is how they deliberately modeled it on the Declaration of Independence.
Starting with,
"We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal." Just adding those two words was revolutionary. And then it listed all the ways society disenfranchised women, denied them rights. No vote, few property rights, limited education, treated like second-class citizens. It really forced the question, who did all men actually include?
and even though getting the vote took decades longer, Seneca Falls was like planting a flag, a clear statement.
Absolutely. A watershed moment. We should also mention others involved, like Mary McClintock, another key organizer, and Maria W. Stewart, an African-American voice advocating for both abolition and women's rights early on.
It's important to remember those names, too.
Definitely. Though it's also true that later on, debates emerged within the movement about focusing primarily on rights for white women, which highlights the complex social realities even within reform movements.
Still, just think about the courage. To stand up, organize, declare yourselves equal when society was actively trying to keep you quiet, it's truly inspiring.
It really is.
But this age of reform wasn't just abolition and women's rights, massive as they were. This spirit seemed to seep into everything. What other areas saw significant reform efforts?
Oh, it spread widely. Take Dorothea Dix and mental health reform.
What was the situation like before her?
Awful. People with mental illness were often seen as morally failed, locked away in prisons, chained, neglected. Dix campaigned tirelessly, state by state, pushing for humane treatment for state-funded asylums.
Shifting from punishment to care.
A fundamental shift, yes. A rethinking of compassion and society's duty to the vulnerable. Then you had education reform. Laurent Clerc, a deaf educator from France, was pivotal in setting up the first American school for the deaf.
Opening up new possibilities.
Absolutely. And people like William Apes, a Native American writer and minister, arguing forcefully for Native rights and equality, challenging prejudice head-on.
So advocates were emerging from many communities.
Yes, and underpinning a lot of this were broader voluntary groups. The American Bible Society distributing Bibles reflecting that religious drive, and places like the Oberlin Institute, now Oberlin College.
What was special about Oberlin?
It became a real hub of reform. It was the first college to admit both men and women, and one of the very first to admit black students. Truly progressive for its time.
So if you connect all these dots,
Yeah.
different movements, different goals, but that shared belief really stands out.
Exactly. A shared belief in progress, in the power of people getting together and pushing for change. It wasn't just about feeling sorry for people. It was about fundamentally changing the structures of society.
Looking back, this age of reform, 1800 to 1848, was just an incredible period of, well, ferment. You had democratic ideals, economic shifts, spiritual revivals, all converging.
Right, empowering ordinary people to try and achieve extraordinary things.
And it really laid the foundation for so much that came later, didn't it?
Absolutely. So many later social justice movements trace their roots back here. It shows that American capacity for, self-critique, for striving towards that more perfect union, even if it's messy and difficult.
It reminds you that change often bubbles up from below.
From individuals, from voluntary groups, just pushing and pushing, forcing society to look at itself.
So a final thought for you, our listeners. Think about how that spirit, that drive for individual and societal improvement from back then, might still echo today. What are the modern versions of these movements, the new Second Great Awakenings or Seneca Falls Conventions, shaping our world right now? And maybe, how can you spot them?
A great question to ponder.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into America's remarkable age of reform.